I'm 53 now. Built 3 companies from ground zero, sat in boardrooms where every word mattered, shook hands with people who respected the empire but never saw the man. Success tastes like dust when you eat it alone. I've been alone for longer than I care to count. Not physically, but in the way that matters, the kind of alone that makes you forget what warmth feels like. I almost turned this recording off, but something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And if you're listening, if you found this somehow, then maybe this was meant for you. Not for everyone, just you. The woman I haven't met yet, or maybe the one I let slip away because I didn't know how to hold anything soft without breaking it. There was a night, God, it must have been 6 years ago now, when I sat in my kitchen at 3 a.m. The marble countertops gleamed under the pendant lights. Everything spotless, everything expensive, everything cold. I had my phone in my hand, scrolling through messages that would never come. I was waiting for someone who'd left months before, and I knew she wasn't coming back. But my fingers kept refreshing anyway, like an addict checking for a fix that's been cut off. The silence in that kitchen wasn't just quiet, it was accusatory. It pressed against my chest like a hand saying, "This is what you chose. This is what you built." I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. That night, something inside me gave up. Not dramatically, not with tears or shouts, just went dark. Like when a light bulb finally exhausts itself and you're left in a room you suddenly don't recognize. I stopped hoping that anyone would understand me. I stopped believing that anyone would stay. I didn't understand it at the time, but maybe that kitchen silence was trying to teach me something I was too proud to hear. Maybe someone had been trying to get through to me for years, through relationships, through loss, through every woman who eventually realized I didn't know how to let anyone in. But I kept building walls and calling them boundaries. If you've ever waited for someone who never came, maybe you know the sound of that kind of silence. It doesn't announce itself, it just settles, like dust on furniture in a house no one visits anymore. After she left, I dated. Of course I did. Successful men don't stay single, we just stay unavailable. I took women to dinners where the wine cost more than their rent. I made them laugh. I was charming in that rehearsed way that passes for connection when you're too scared to offer anything real. But every time someone got close enough to see past the performance, I'd feel my chest tighten. I'd start noticing their flaws like a prosecutor building a case. I'd find reasons why it wouldn't work. I was so damn good at leaving before I could be left. There was this one woman, Sarah. She had this way of tilting her head when she listened, like she was actually trying to understand, not just waiting for her turn to talk. We'd been seeing each other for 5 months when she said, "I feel like I'm dating a ghost. You're here, but you're not really here." I remember standing in her apartment doorway, car keys already in my hand, and feeling absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just this hollow confirmation that she was right, and that I couldn't give her what she needed, because I'd locked it away so deep I couldn't find it myself. I drove home that night on the expressway, and I remember thinking, when did I become this? Halfway through writing this, I need to tell you something I've been ashamed to admit. I'm terrified. Not of dying alone. That's almost comfortable now, like an old coat. I'm terrified of believing again. I'm terrified that if I let myself hope, if I let myself want something real with someone, they'll see what Sarah saw. They'll see the empty spaces where love is supposed to live. They'll see that I'm just very good at pretending to be whole. And maybe worst of all, I'm terrified that I've run out of time, that whatever capacity I had to love someone properly dried up in all those years of protecting myself from the very thing I needed most. But here's what's starting to happen, and I don't know what to do with it. Lately, when I sit in that same kitchen, the one that used to feel like a mausoleum, I catch myself imagining something different. Not loud or dramatic, just someone moving through that space. Coffee brewing, a soft voice asking about my day, laughter that isn't performative, the kind of presence that makes silence feel like companionship instead of punishment. I don't know why I'm picturing a future that doesn't feel as empty. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's just the way drowning people hallucinate islands. But the image keeps coming back. And it's always you, whoever you are standing in that light. I picture telling you about the kitchen. about Sarah, about all the ways I learned to survive by refusing to need anyone. And in this imagining, you don't fix me. You don't save me with some perfect understanding or unconditional acceptance. You just stay while I figure out how to be human again. I'm past the age where men pretend they have it all figured out. The gray at my temples isn't distinguished, it's evidence. Evidence of nights I can't take back, words I can't unsay, moments when I chose pride over presence. I built my identity around being unreachable, untouchable. Turns out, that's just another word for unavailable. I keep starting to delete this recording, but every time my finger hovers over that button, something pulls me back. Maybe it's you, the woman I'm speaking to without knowing your name. Maybe you're listening in a car somewhere, or lying awake at night like I used to, wondering if you're too damaged to ever get this right. Maybe you need to hear from someone who got it spectacularly wrong, so you don't feel so alone in your own wreckage. There's a specific memory that won't leave me alone lately. I was 47. My father had just died cancer, the slow kind that steals someone piece by piece until you're grieving months before they actually go. I sat in that hospital room on his last day, watching machines breathe for him, and he opened his eyes one final time. His hand reached for mine, weak and trembling. He whispered, "Don't wait as long as I did to let someone love you." I nodded, squeezed his hand, told him I understood, but I didn't. Not really. How could I? I was still operating under the assumption that love was something you controlled, something you strategized, something you earned through achievement and then managed like a portfolio. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was back at work. 14-hour days, conference calls, acquisitions. I threw myself into the noise because silence meant thinking about what he'd said. And thinking about it meant admitting that I'd spent decades building a life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt like a prison from within. I didn't tell anyone how it felt to lose him. Not my friends, if you can call them that. Not the woman I was seeing at the time. I showed up to his memorial in a black suit, gave a eulogy that made people cry, shook hands with relatives who said I was handling it so well. And then I went home to an empty penthouse and stood at the window looking at city lights until dawn, feeling absolutely nothing. That's the thing about shutting down emotionally. You think you're protecting yourself from pain, but you're also locking out every other feeling that makes being alive worth it. Joy, connection, wonder, hope. You become this efficient machine that processes life without actually experiencing it. If you've ever stood at a funeral and realized you don't know how to cry anymore, maybe you understand what I'm talking about. It's not strength. It's damage pretending to be resilience. 6 months after my father died, I met Rebecca at a charity gala. She worked for a nonprofit, had this laugh that sounded like it came from somewhere genuine, wore a dress that probably cost a tenth of what the other women there were wearing, but somehow looked more elegant because she wasn't trying to impress anyone. We talked by the bar for an hour. She told me about her work with refugee children. I told her about my companies, but for once I wasn't performing. I was actually curious about her. She asked me about my family, and I mentioned my father had recently passed. She touched my arm, and something in her eyes made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. "I'm sorry," she said. Just that. No platitudes about him being in a better place. No awkward attempts to change the subject. Just genuine, simple acknowledgement. We dated for 8 months. Best 8 months I'd had in a decade, which should have been a warning sign about how low my baseline had become. She'd stay over on weekends. We'd cook together, something I hadn't done with anyone in years. She'd read in my living room while I worked, and her presence made the space feel less like a showcase and more like a home. But here's what I couldn't tell her, what I was too afraid to admit even to myself. I was waiting for her to leave. Every day, I'd wake up and think, this is the day she figures it out. This is when she realizes I'm hollow. I'd catch myself creating test-canceling plans at the last minute, being deliberately distant, picking fights about nothing, just to see if she'd stay, just to prove my theory that everyone eventually leaves. One night she was making pasta in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd sat alone years before, and she was humming something soft while the water boiled. I watched her from the doorway, this beautiful, kind woman who'd somehow decided I was worth her time, and instead of feeling grateful, I felt terrified. She turned around and caught me staring. What? She asked, smiling. Nothing, I said. But inside, I was thinking, how do I tell you I don't know how to keep this? How do I explain that I'm going to ruin this like I've ruined everything else? 3 weeks later, I ended it. Made up some excuse about needing to focus on work, about timing being wrong, about her deserving someone who could give her more attention. She cried, asked me if this was really what I wanted, and I looked at her with these cold, businesslike eyes I'd perfected over years of difficult conversations and said, I think it's for the best. I watched her pack her things from my apartment, a toothbrush, a favorite sweater she'd left hanging in my closet, a book she'd been reading on my nightstand. Each item going into her bag felt like evidence of my own capacity for self-destruction. After she left, I sat on my couch for hours, didn't turn on the TV, didn't check my phone, just sat there in the dark, and for the first time in months, I felt something. Not relief, not vindication, just this crushing weight of knowing I'd just thrown away something real because I was too damaged to believe I deserved it. Now, here's the part I've been ashamed to say out loud. I'm not afraid of being hurt. I've been hurt before. We all have. I'm afraid of being the one who hurts someone who doesn't deserve it. I'm afraid that my brokenness is contagious, that anyone who gets close enough to really see me will end up carrying scars they didn't ask for. That's why I pushed Rebecca away. Not because she wasn't enough, because I believed I would inevitably prove to be not enough, and I couldn't stand the thought of her discovering that, slowly, painfully, over months or years. So I made the cut clean, quick, final. But grief doesn't care about your strategic decisions. It finds you anyway. 3 months after Rebecca left, I saw her Instagram post. She'd gotten engaged to someone else. A teacher. Kind face. They were standing on a beach somewhere, both laughing, and she looked happier than I'd ever made her look. I stared at that photo for longer than I want to admit. And what broke me wasn't jealousy. It was the realization that she'd moved on and found happiness, which meant the problem was never her. It was me. I was the variable that made love impossible. But something strange has been happening lately. I keep thinking about my father's last words. Don't wait as long as I did. I'm starting to understand that maybe he wasn't just talking about letting someone in. Maybe he was talking about letting go of the fear that's been running my life since I can't even remember when. Maybe there's still time. Maybe it's not too late to learn what he tried to teach me in that hospital room. Maybe forgiveness isn't just something you give to others. Maybe it starts with forgiving yourself for all the ways you've failed, all the people you've pushed away, all the years you've spent hiding. I picture sometimes what it would be like to sit across from you, whoever you are, and tell you everything. The failures, the fears, the truth about how broken I felt. And in this imagining, you don't fix me with perfect understanding or unconditional acceptance. You just look at me and say, me too. I'm at an age where most men have photo albums full of family gatherings, kids' graduations, anniversary trips. I have property deeds and profit statements. I have awards and boxes I've never unpacked. I have a wine collection worth more than most people's cars, and I drink it alone while reviewing quarterly reports. This wasn't the plan, or maybe it was, and I was too busy executing to notice what I was building. I couldn't sleep last night. I'm not kidding. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. Yeah, you. The person listening to this right now. And I realized I have to tell you something. Something urgent. Something that can't wait until tomorrow. I keep pausing this recording and walking away. But something won't let me stop. Maybe it's because you're out there somewhere, listening to this in a moment when you need to know that someone else understands what it feels like to wake up one day and realize you've been sleepwalking through your own life. Maybe you need to hear from someone who spent decades perfecting the art of being present without actually being there. There's a moment I can't shake. I was 49. My business partner, Mark, the only person I'd worked with for over 20 years, had a heart attack. Massive. The kind that doesn't give second chances. I got the call at 6 a.m. from his wife. her voice breaking apart on the other end. I drove to the hospital in my car that cost more than most houses, and I remember thinking how quiet everything was. No traffic, just the hum of the engine and the gray light of dawn bleeding through the windshield. I should have been devastated. Mark wasn't just my partner. He was the closest thing I had to a best friend, though I'd never actually told him that. But as I drove, I felt nothing. Not shock, not grief, just this hollow acknowledgement that another person I'd kept at arm's length was gone. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to force myself to feel something. Anything, even anger, would have been better than the void. At the hospital, his wife collapsed into my arms. Their two daughters were crying. Extended family members I'd met at company events over the years all looked at me with these expectant faces, like I was supposed to say something profound, something that would make sense of it all. I stood there in my tailored suit, and I gave them what they needed. I held Mark's wife while she sobbed. I told his daughters their father was proud of them. I made phone calls to investors, rearranged schedules, handled logistics. I was efficient, professional, compassionate in that controlled way that looks like strength. But inside, nothing, just static. I didn't tell anyone how that felt, but I'll tell you now. That day, standing in that sterile hospital corridor with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils, I realized I'd become something less than human. I'd optimized myself for success and efficiency so completely that I'd edited out the messy and comfortable, beautiful parts that make life worth living. I didn't understand it at the time, but maybe God was trying to shake me awake. Maybe every loss, every person who walked away, every moment of isolation was a message I was too defended to receive. You're dying and you don't even know it. If you've ever stood at someone's bedside and realized you've forgotten how to cry, maybe you know what I'm talking about. It's not stoicism, it's not strength. It's the kind of emptiness that makes you wonder if you're even capable of love anymore, or if that part of you atrophied from disuse years ago. After Mark died, I threw myself into work even harder, took over his responsibilities, expanded into new markets, made more money in 6 months than most people see in a lifetime. Everyone praised my resilience. Board members said I was handling it remarkably well. Investors appreciated my focus. But late at night, I'd sit in my study with a glass of scotch, staring at a photo on my desk, Mark and me at a conference, years ago, both laughing at something I can't remember. And I'd feel this creeping horror